Page 48. 10. So bare an outline gives only an inadequate picture of the passion with which Arabs in Palestine and in neighboring countries resent the invasion of Palestine by a people which, though originally Semitic, now represents an alien civilization. Even the Muslims of India have made representations to the committee in opposition to Zionism. One witnesses in Palestine not merely the impact of European culture upon the East, but also the impact of Western science and Western technology upon a semi-feudal civilization. It is not surprising that the Arabs have bitterly resented this invasion and have resisted it by force of arms. The Arab civilization of Palestine is based on the clan. Leadership resides in a small group of influential families, and it is almost impossible for the son of an Arab fellah to rise to a position of wealth and political influence. Arab agriculture in Palestine is traditional, and improvement is hampered by an antiquated system of land tenure. The Arab adheres to a strict social code, far removed from the customs of the modern world, and he is shocked by innovations of dress and manners which seem completely natural to the Jewish immigrant. Thus, the sight of a Jewish woman in shorts offends the Arab concept of propriety. The freedom of relations between the sexes, and the neglect of good form as he conceives, it violate the entire code of life in which the Arab is brought up. 11. The Arabs of Palestine are overwhelmed by a vague sense of the power of Western capital, represented by the Jewish population. The influx of Western capital and the purchase of modern equipment for agriculture and industry excite in the minds of the Arabs a sense of inferiority, and the feeling that they are contending against an imponderable force which is difficult to resist. This feeling is accentuated by the fact that they realize that the Jewish case is well understood and well portrayed in Washington and London, and that they have no means comparable in effectiveness of stating their side of the controversy to the Western world. They have particularly resented the resolutions in favor of Zionist aspirations, adopted respectively by the United States Congress and by the British Labour Party. Although the Arab states have diplomatic representation, and 5 of them are members of the United Nations, the Arabs of Palestine feel nevertheless that they have not succeeded in making their case heard. The Western countries have many Jewish but few Arab citizens, and Arabs are less familiar with modern methods of propaganda. They feel that their case is being judged and their fate is being decided by mysterious forces in the Western world, which they do not understand and which do not understand them. 12. The period since the First World War has been marked by a rising wave of nationalism in all Arab countries. Palestinian Arabs share this sentiment, and they are strongly supported in their demand for independence and self-government. Page 49. By all the states of the Arab League. No other subject has occupied so much of the attention of the Arab League or has done so much to unite its membership as has the question of Palestine. 13. Those members of the committee who traveled in the neighboring Arab countries found that hostility to Zionism was as strong and widespread there as in Palestine itself. They received from HRH, the regent of Iraq, a copy of a letter in which he had told President Roosevelt that all the Arab countries will unite against any danger that the Arabs of Palestine may have to meet. Moreover, the governments and peoples of the neighboring states believe that a Zionist state in Palestine would be a direct threat to them and would impede their efforts towards a closer Arab union. The chief delegate of Syria at the General Assembly of the United Nations told the committee in London that Palestine in alien hands would be a wedge splitting the Arab world at a most vital and sensitive point. The same witness expressed the further fear of the Arabs that a Zionist state would inevitably become expansionist and aggressive, and would tend to enter into alliance with any power which might, in the future, pursue an anti-Arab policy. The Middle East, he wrote, is a vital region in which all the great powers are interested. A Zionist state in Palestine could only exist with the support of foreign powers. This would not only mean a state of tension between those foreign powers and the Arab states, but also the grave possibility of dangerous alignments and maneuvers, which might end in international friction at the highest level and possibly disaster. Page 50. Chapter 7. Christian Interests in Palestine. 1. In addition to the witnesses concerned exclusively with political issues, the committee also heard representatives of Christian churches. The Arab Christians, divided among many denominations, and numbering some 125,000, form the overwhelming majority of Christians actually living in Palestine. Their delegation, led by the Greek Catholic Archbishop of Galilee, declared their complete solidarity with the Muslim Arabs in the demand for an independent Arab state. The non-Palestinian Christian groups were unable to speak with a common voice. Indeed, Christians have so completely failed to achieve unity, or even harmony, in the practical tasks of administering the Christian holy places and caring for the pilgrims who visit them, that the keys of the Holy Sepulchre are still entrusted to Muslims. The lamentable fact that there is no single spokesman in Palestine for Christendom tends to obscure the legitimate Christian interest in the Holy Land, which must be safeguarded in any solution of the national problem. This interest demands not only freedom of access to the holy places, but also that tranquility should be achieved in a country all of which, from the Christian point of view, is a holy land. 2. The significance of Palestine since prehistoric times in the development of civilization cannot be overestimated. Nor should the interests of archaeology and history be forgotten. The maintenance of conditions under which such studies can be pursued is a genuine concern of civilization. Moreover, an increased pilgrim and tourist traffic would constitute an invisible export of substantial value to a country with so large an adverse balance of trade. And the contact in Palestine between these travelers from the Western world and the representatives of the Jewish and Muslim faiths would be of great importance to international understanding. 3. The extent to which the holy places, sacred to Christians, Muslims, and Jews, are interspersed is often not fully appreciated. It is impossible to segregate the holy places sacred to the three great religions into separate geographical units. They are scattered over the whole of Palestine, and not, as is often imagined, confined to the Jerusalem and Nazareth areas. 4. The responsibility of the Christian world toward Palestine was well expressed by General Allenby in the proclamation which he made on the occasion of the occupation of Jerusalem on the December 11, 1917. Page 51. Furthermore, since your city is regarded with affection by the adherents of three of the great religions of mankind, and its soil has been consecrated by the prayers and pilgrimages of multitudes of devout people of these three religions for many centuries, therefore do I make known to you that every sacred building, monument, holy spot, shrine, traditional site, endowment, pious bequest, or customary place of prayer, of whatsoever form of the three religions, will be maintained and protected according to the existing customs and beliefs of those to whose faiths they are sacred. 5. The religious importance of Palestine to Muslims, Jews, and Christians alike makes it improper to treat it either as an Arab state or as exclusively designated to the fulfillment of Jewish national aspirations. A solution of the Palestine problem must not only heal political rivalries of Jew and Arab, but must also safeguard its unique religious values. Page 52. Chapter 8. Jews, Arabs, and Government. The State within the State. 1. The Jews have developed, under the aegis of the Jewish Agency and the Vaad Leumi, a strong and tightly woven community. There thus exists a virtual Jewish non-territorial state, with its own executive and legislative organs, parallel in many respects to the mandatory administration, and serving as the concrete symbol of the Jewish national home. This Jewish shadow government has ceased to cooperate with the administration in the maintenance of law and order, and in the suppression of terrorism. 2. Quite apart from the increasing strength of the terrorist gangs, which enjoy widespread popular support, there are many signs that fanaticism and nationalist propaganda are beginning to affect detrimentally the Jewish educational system. It appears to us wholly harmful that the obligatory period of 1 year's national service, instituted by the Jewish Agency and the Vaad Leumi, is now partly used for military training. The closing of the ranks, moreover, which we noted above, has increased the totalitarian tendencies to which a nationalist society is always liable. To speak of a Jewish terror would be a gross exaggeration. But there are disquieting indications that illegal organization and the atmosphere of conspiracy, which inevitably accompanies it, are having their corroding effects on that free democracy, which has always been the pride of the Palestinian Jews. Every thoughtful Jew with whom we talked was profoundly disturbed by these symptoms. But none was bold enough to prophesy that they would disappear so long as the Palestine administration carried out a policy which seems to every Jew to be in direct contravention of his natural rights. Jewish relations with Arabs. 3. Not only is the Jewish community largely independent of and at odds with the Palestine government, but it is also quite distinct from and in conflict with the Arab community, with which in many areas it is territorially intertwined. In part, this is a natural result of Zionist concentration upon the development of the Jewish community. If the Arabs have benefited, they have done so only in comparison with the non-Palestinian Arabs, whereas they have remained far beneath the Palestinian Jews in terms of national income, social services, education, and general standard of living. This has made it easier for the Arab political leaders to, page 53, keep alive anti-Jewish feeling in the minds of the Arab masses. The economic gulf separating Jew and Arab in Palestine has been widened, in part at least, by Jewish policies concerning the non-employment of Arab labor, on land purchased by the Jewish National Fund, and the refusal to devote Jewish funds and energies directly to the improvement of Arab standards of living. Efforts by the Jews in this direction might be quite as important for the growth and security of the national home as the draining of swamplands or the creation of Jewish industry. 4. But unfortunately there are signs of a hardening of the Jewish attitude towards the Arabs. Too often the Jew is content to refer to the indirect benefits accruing to the Arabs from his coming, and to leave the matter there. Passionately loving every foot of Eretz Israel, he finds it almost impossible to look at the issue from the Arab point of view, and to realize the depth of feeling aroused by his invasion of Palestine. He compares his own achievements with the slow improvements made by the Arab village, always to the disadvantage of the latter, and forgets the enormous financial, educational, and technical advantages bestowed upon him by world Zionism. When challenged on his relations with the Arabs, he is too often content to point out the superficial friendliness of everyday life in town and village, a friendliness which indubitably exists. In so doing, he sometimes ignores the deep political antagonism which inspires the whole Arab community, or thinks that he has explained it away by stating that it is the result of self-seeking propaganda by the rich Effendi class. 5. It is not unfair to say that the Jewish community in Palestine has never, as a community, faced the problem of cooperation with the Arabs. It is, for instance, significant that, in the Jewish Agency's proposal for a Jewish state, the problem of handling 1.25 million Arabs is dealt with in the vaguest of generalities. 6. We noted, however, a few hopeful signs. Reference was made above to the proposals for cooperation with the Arabs, made by Hashomer Hatzair and by the Ihud Group. The committee observed with pleasure the Arab-Jewish cooperation achieved on the municipal commission which governs Haifa, and in the citrus control and marketing boards, as well as the joint trade union activity between Jew and Arab in the Palestine Potash Company and on the railways. But such examples of cooperation are rare in Palestine, and they are far outweighed in Arab eyes by the exclusiveness of the General Federation of Jewish Labor in its trade union policy, and of the Jewish Agency in its labor policy on land purchased for Jewish settlement. The Jews and the administration. 7. We were profoundly impressed by the very varied. Page 54. Experiments in land settlement which we inspected, ranging from individualist cooperatives to pure collectivist communities. Here, indeed, is a miracle both of physical achievement and of spiritual endeavor, which justifies the dreams of those Jews and Gentiles who first conceived the idea of the national home. Of Jewish industry in Palestine, it is too early yet to speak with confidence. There is boundless optimism and energy, great administrative capacity, but a shortage of skilled labor and, as a result, more quantity than quality of output. 8. As pioneers in Palestine, the Jews have a record of which they can be proud. In Palestine, there has been no expulsion of the indigenous population, and exploitation of cheap Arab labor has been vigorously opposed as inconsistent with Zionism. The failing of Palestinian Jewry is a different one. The Jews have always been, in the biblical phrase, a peculiar people which turned in on itself and suffered the consequences of its peculiarity. In Palestine, under the special conditions of the mandate, they have regained their national self-confidence, but they have not been able to throw off their exclusiveness and tendency to self-isolation. 9. We believe that this failure is, in part at least, attributable to the relations between the Palestine administration and the Jewish community since 1939, which have undoubtedly exaggerated the natural Jewish tendency to exclusiveness. Moreover, the Jews feel that they have enough to do defending their own position without taking on the Arab problem as well. 10. A second factor of great importance is the failure to develop self-governing institutions. The Jews, like the Arabs, are completely deprived of all responsible participation in central government. Their democracy can only work within the Jewish community and to a limited degree in local affairs. Thus, they have not had the opportunity which self-government brings to learn the lesson of responsibility for the good of the whole state. They have been driven back on themselves. This may in part explain the fact that at least 1/3 of the Jews who have settled in Palestine during the last 10 years have failed to apply for Palestinian citizenship. But nothing which we saw in Palestine gave us any reason to believe that, charged with the democratic responsibilities, for which they are undoubtedly fit, the Jews of Palestine would not master the lessons of self-government. Arab leadership. 11. The Arabs are divided politically by the personal bickerings of the leaders, which still center round the differences of the Husseinis and their rivals, and socially. Page 55. By the gap which separates the small upper class from the mass of the peasants, a gap which the new intelligentsia is not yet strong enough to bridge. Consequently, they have developed no such internal democracy as have the Jews. That their divisions have not been overcome, and a formally organized community developed, is in part the result of a less acutely self-conscious nationalism than is found today among the Jews. It is, however, also the outcome of a failure of political responsibility. The Arab leaders, rejecting what they regard as a subordinate status in the Palestinian state, and viewing themselves as the proper heirs of the mandatory administration, have refused to develop a self-governing Arab community parallel to that of the Jews. Nor, so far, have they been prepared to see their position called in question by such democratic forms as elections for the Arab Higher Committee or the formation of popularly based political parties. This failure is recognized by the new intelligentsia, which, however, is unlikely to exercise much power until it has the backing of a larger middle class. Need for Arab education. 12. Many Arabs are graduates of the American University at Beirut. A few have studied in universities in Cairo, England, Europe, and the United States. Others have received higher education at the Arab College for Men and the Women's Training College in Jerusalem, both of which are efficient but inadequately financed government institutions. The Arabs are aware of Western civilization and increasingly eager to share its benefits. But the numbers receiving such education are still miserably small, since the only university in Palestine, the Hebrew University on Mount Scopus, teaches only in Hebrew. So, too, with secondary education. There are only some 15 Arab secondary schools in the whole of Palestine, and one fully developed agricultural school, the Kadori School at Tulkarm, which specializes in the training of teachers of agriculture for Arab schools. With only 65 places, however, it too is totally inadequate. The problem of teaching modern methods of agriculture, to a population 80% of which gains its living by farming, has not yet been solved by the government or faced by the Arab politicians. Facilities for technical education are no better, a single school with some 60 places. 13. On the primary level, the position is slightly better. The schools are under the control of the administration and financed by public funds. As far as it goes, the primary education is well planned and administered. It is not merely a bookish education, but includes also manual training and instruction in agriculture, where the equipment is available. Some of the school gardens which surround the schools in the Arab villages are models of neatness and skill. But the fact remains that something less than half the Arab children who would like to attend school can do so today. Page 56. Even in a wealthy town like Haifa, we were told by the municipal commission that half the Arab boys and the majority of the Arab girls receive no education at all. In most of the country districts, the situation is still worse, particularly with regard to the girls. Only one Arab girl in 8 receives any education. 14. This is all the more tragic since the desire for education is now strong throughout the poorer classes, not merely in the cities, but in almost every Arab village. Indeed, some villages visited by the committee had either built their own schools, completely from voluntary subscriptions by the villagers, or had contributed largely to their cost on their own initiative. 15. The lamentable condition of Arab education is a real cause for discontent. This discontent is increased by the contrast with the opportunities offered to the Jewish child. Jewish education in Palestine is financed by the Jewish community and by the fees which Jewish parents can afford to pay. Practically every Jewish child has the opportunity for primary education, and those who can afford the fees have ample opportunity for technical, secondary, and university education in Palestine. The government contributes only a small per capita grant in aid and exercises little control of the curriculum. 16. It is difficult to avoid the conclusion that the time has come for the Arab community to assume the same responsibility with regard to education as the Jewish. With advice and financial aid from the government, and with a new sense of responsibility on the part of the Arab leadership, compulsory education could, we were informed, be introduced within the next 10 years. This is not only essential from an educational point of view. There can be no real unity between a literate and an illiterate population. The administration. 17. Palestine is administered by officials of the British Colonial Service. Subject to the provisions of the mandate, all major decisions of policy are taken in London as they would be for a colonial territory. As Mr. Churchill has said, the suggestion that the High Commissioner either has a policy of his own in contradistinction to that of His Majesty's government, or that, if this were so, His Majesty's government would permit him to carry it out, would be foreign to all the traditions of British administration. Indeed, the administration of Palestine has probably less freedom of action than the page 57. Administrations of some less developed territories, simply because the affairs of Palestine arouse more public interest, are the subject of more questions in the House of Commons, and must therefore be supervised more closely by the responsible minister. 18. While admitting this difficulty, we must express the view that this system militates most gravely against the chances of reconciliation between Jew and Arab. A delicate situation, and the situation in Palestine is always delicate, cannot be met successfully by remote control. Within a general directive, the man on the spot, like the general conducting the battle, must be given the responsibility. If this is not done, the chance of reconciling the interests of the national home with those of the Arabs of Palestine is small indeed. 19. In Palestine itself, we also found a tendency to centralization which was criticized by the Peel Commission, but which is in part at least another inevitable consequence of the dominant role of politics in the life of the country. Since every administrative question, however insignificant in itself, is liable to be transformed into a political issue by one community or the other, there is a natural tendency for every action to be carefully scrutinized at the center. The slowness of the administration in dealing with matters not at first sight political, against which complaint is often made, is partly a result of this and partly of the fact that the Chief Secretary, through whose hands all important business must pass, is himself obliged to give much of his time to conducting relations of a quasi-diplomatic character with the leaders of the Arab and Jewish communities. 20. Palestine is a unique country, bearing no resemblance to most of the countries administered by the British Colonial Service. It may be questioned, therefore, whether an administration of the colonial type is the ideal instrument for governing two peoples, each of which, in the absence of the other, would probably by now be enjoying complete independence. On the other hand, it seems difficult to foresee radical changes in the system, so long as the division between Arabs and Jews compels British officials to assume so extensive a responsibility, and in view of the fact that their actions must be accounted for both to Parliament and to an international organization, each responsive to a keenly interested public opinion. 21. What is not open to question is the patience and loyalty to their task of the officials, on whose shoulders rests the main burden of this heavy responsibility. We were impressed also by the generally high standard of the